The Suladi Saptatala, as I said, is it's about 500 years old, and it has been very much part of Carnatic music. It still continues to be part of Carnatic music, but it might seem a little overly complicated for a musical system. Why do we need so many kinds of talas? You know, why should we have gestures? Why these gestures? No, the question of why only these gestures, it's probably a research topic. Why is it that these gestures have come down? In fact, there is a suggestion in Abhinav Gupta's work that these gestures are possibly derived from the gestures that were used during the sacrifices in the Samaveda, for instance. Samaveda prescribes hand gestures, specific gestures that are to be used during specific points of time during any sacrifice. So, this beating and counting, beating and throwing your hand aside, why only these, why not something else? It is ultimately it is only arbitrary. In fact, in this context I might also mention that these three angas that I spoke about, laghu, that is beating and counting, dhrutam, beating and throwing your hand aside, and anudhrutam, which is just beating, these are the three angas that are used in Suladi Saptatala. There are other tala angas which are used in another tala system which is called the 108 anga tala. It's almost very rare to find compositions or performances using those talas among the 108 talas. If at all they are performed, it is only for an interest, novelty, a kind of a demonstration purposes, but for performances the 108 talas are not ever used these days. Suladi Saptatalas are still used. The other angas that the 108 tala system uses are called Guru, Plutam and Kakapadam. Guru has a count of 8, Plutam has a count of 12, and Kakapadam has a count of 16. And the tala kriya, what is done, the gestures, it varies from 4 down, 4 here, 4 there, and then up, and sometimes they also do this kind of a circular movement. So these are all the kriyas that are associated with the other talangas, which is not of our concern at all. It was certainly a part of Carnatic music until a couple of centuries ago, or even the last century, early parts of 20th century, we might have had some active renditions of these talas, but certainly in contemporary Carnatic music these are not actively performed. So Suladi Saptatala, coming back to it, the one reason why we do need to maintain the tala cycle with this kind of codified gestures is that, as I have mentioned earlier, this is the reference for everybody, for the performer, for the singer, if there is a singer, for the accompanist, and also for the audience. You need to maintain the tala cycle. Maintaining the tala cycle, as I said, is sacrosanct. It is as important as maintaining the shruti, maintaining the pitch fidelity, as it is important to maintain the raga grammar or the composition's integrity. These are all things that are musts in Carnatic music. As a classical musical form, these are all things that are inviolable. The tala cycle is one such thing. If you have a tala cycle of 6 beats in a composition, or 7 beats, or 21 beats, that cycle has to be maintained throughout the rendition of that particular piece. And unless we have this performance of the tala, it is quite difficult, because these cycles are long. They are not short ones like 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 or 1 2 3 1 2 3. These were short cycles. Then it's possible to to remember it, to keep track of it. But when you have longer cycles, it's not easy to keep track of the cycle. Of course, great masters who have been performing for years, for decades, they do get it into their system, and they don't need an external reference to perform. When you think of great instrumentalists who play when you're playing on an instrument, the veena or the violin, your hands are engaged. You don't have hands to perform the tala. So great masters, they didn't need an external reference, but anybody at even a slightly less elevated level, they need the tala performed for them to keep track of the tala cycle. So coming back to the Suladi Sapta tala, for us to have 7 into 5 into 5, 175 talas. Now, do we really need so many talas? For instance, let me take Dhruva tala and Atatala. Now Dhruva tala, both of them are part of the Suladi Sapta tala, if you remember. Dhruva tala has a structure of 1 0 1 1, that is Laghu, Dhrutam, Laghu, Laghu. Atatala has a structure of 1 1 0 0. Now suppose we take Chatushra Jati Dhruva tala, then let us see how many beats are there per avartana. So this is 4, this is 2, this is again 4, and this is again 4. The Chatushra Jati Dhruva talam is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14. 14 beats, 14 matras. Atatala, let us take Khanda Jati. In fact, by default, all of these Suladi Saptatalas are associated, all the Suladi Saptatalas are associated with one or the other Jati by default. So, Dhruvatalam is by default associated with Chatushra Jati. Atatalam by default is associated with the Khanda Jati, that is 5 beats. So, again Dhruva, if you take Atatala, Khanda Jati Atatala, you have 5, Laghu is 5, another Laghu is 5, Dhrutam is 2, another Dhrutam is 2. Again you have 14 beats. So what is the point? Why must we have 2 different talas when the number of beats is the same? There is a point. We will watch a short demonstration now, again performed at a very beginner's level. As I said, the Suladi Saptatala is something that is introduced to beginners right away in a set of lessons called Alankaras. Now this Dhruva Tala, the structure of the Tala is like this: 1 0 1 1. Atatala, the structure is 1 1 0 0. So the structure is very different. The composition structure will also correspond to the structure of this tala. The internal structure of the composition will be such that it will reflect this structure. Let us watch this clip.
Sari ga ma ga ri, sari ga ri, sari ga ma, ri ga ma pa ma ga, ri ga ma ga ri ga ma pa da pa ma ga ma pa ga ma pa da ni da pa ma pa da ni pa da ni sa ni da pa da ni da pa da ni sa ni da pa da ni sa ni da ni sa ni da pa ma pa da ni da pa da ni da pa ma ga ma pa da pa ma pa da pa ma ga ri ga ma pa ma ga ri sa ri ga ma ri sa.
The next you will demonstrate Atatala, which is also of 14 matras, but the Tala Kriya is very different. The Atatala is, the Kriya is like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So Atatala is 2 laghus and 2 dhrutams.
Sa ri ga ma ri ga ma pa ga ma pa da ma pa da ni pa da ni sa ni da pa ni da pa ma da pa ma ga pa ma ga ri ma ga ri sa.
So as we saw, Dhruva Tala is laghu followed by dhrutam followed by 2 laghus. So sari ga ma ga ri sari ga ri sari ga ma. Whereas Atatala has 2. So you see the alankara, it is a composition. It's created such that it fits into the tala anga is reflected in this. It coincides with the tala anga. Sari ga ma ga ri sari ga ri sari ga ma. To see how the Atatala alankara is constructed, again that will reflect the tala angas. Sari ga sari ga ma. Now suppose I were to sing this alankara in Dhruva Talam. This is how the thing is structured. Sari ga sari ga ma. That is, if I were to sing it in Dhruva Talam, sari ga sa, it is coming in the middle of nowhere. Sari ga sa. So the compositions and the tala angas, there will be a close connection between these two. Now if we take a composition, a proper composition, this of course is an exercise. What was just demonstrated is an exercise, what is called abhyasa ganam, that is Abhyasa Ganam is a repertoire that is used only for practice. Now we have the other part of Carnatic repertoire which is called Sabha Ganam, that which is used for performances. Even in compositions in Sabha Ganam, because ultimately that is what is relevant, we have compositions which are rendered in one or the other of the Suladi Sapta Tala, but the composition's internal structure will reflect the Tala Anga structure. Now let us take two other talas which have the same number of beats. Matya Tala, Jhampa Tala. Matya Tala is also associated with Chatushra Jati, so Chatushra Matya, and Jhampa is always by default associated with Mishra. Of course, we can have other Jatis also, but by default, unless otherwise mentioned, Matya Talam is Chatushra Jati, Jhampa Tala is Mishra Jati. Matya Tala has a structure 1, 0, 1. Jhampa has 1, Anudruta and Druta. So Laghu, Druta, Laghu, Laghu, Anudruta, Druta. So Chatushra Matya will have 4 plus 2 plus 4, that is 10. Mishra Jhampa will have 7 plus 1 plus 2. That's equal to again 10. Now there are two great compositions in these two talas by Muthuswami Dikshidhar. It's part of a group of kritis called Navagraha kritis. The Chatushra Jati Matya Tala is a composition in Asaviri Ragam, Chandram Bhajamanasa. The structure of the composition is like this. Matya Tala is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's see how the structure of the composition coincides with the structure of the Tala. Chandram Bhajamanasa Sadhu Hridaya Sadrisham Chandram Bhajamanasa Sadhu Hridaya Sadrisham Chandram Bhaja. A link to a rendition of this composition is here. You may listen to it. And the other composition we have to consider is in Mishra Jhampa Tala. The composition is Buddham Ashrayami. And the Mishra Jhampa Tala is 1, Mishra is 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is Mishra Jhampa Tala. And the composition is structured to reflect the Tala Angas. As you can see, Buddham Ashrayami Rayami Satatam. So that is the Mishra Jampatala, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. To wrap up our session on Tala, we have many talas in Carnatic music. The most widely used are, as I said, Adi Tala of 8 beats, Rupaka Tala of 6 beats, Khanda Chapu of 5 beats, Mishra Chapu of 7 beats. The Suladi Saptatala that we just saw are also used. In fact, Attatala has a significant presence in Varnams. Varnam is a kind of composition which we will be seeing soon in our next session or so. Varnam is a compositional type, and most Varnams are rendered in Aditala mostly, but we have a group of talas which are rendered in Attatala also. So Attatala has significant presence in Varnam as a compositional form, and the Suladi Saptatala have a very significant presence in the in what is called Ragam Tanam Pallavi. Ragam Tanam Pallavi is a presentational piece. It's a piece that is presented in Carnatic music concerts, and the Pallavi, which is the compositional aspect of, which is the only composition that is used in RTP. That is, RTP is heavy on improvisation, but we have one line of composition, and that composition is very often, almost by default, it's cast in one of the Suladi Saptatalas and in some unusual jati and nadai. We will see more about Suladi Saptatala when we talk about Ragam Tanam Pallavi in detail, but in the meantime, even in the corpus of Carnatic compositions proper, Suladi Saptatala has a significant presence. So, having covered Raga and Tala, we are now ready to take a look at Carnatic music as it is performed, as it is heard. When we hear Carnatic music, what is it that we hear? Tala and Raga are underlying principles, but what we hear, the compositions, the improvisation in Carnatic music, that is something we will now talk about in our next sessions.